This is Interpreting Wine founder and host Lawrence Francis inviting you to my first ever Interpreting Wine Hospitality Summit. This first of its kind audio event takes place from Monday the 28th of September until Thursday the 1st of October and will feature a diverse range of voices from London hospitality. Attendees gain early access to episodes over the 4-day event, and each episode will feature a different figure from the London hospitality scene, sharing stories and practical tips to help you navigate these uncertain times. Signing up will give you exclusive access to show notes for each session, giving you a list of key takeaways and strategies you can experiment with right away. And you will also get access to the Interpreting Wine Hospitality Summit private Facebook group, where you can discuss each session and access behind-the-scenes content. To sign up for this free event, just head to interpretingwine.com/summit. Today's episode of the podcast features Bàrbara Mesquida Mora of Mesquida Mora in Mallorca. We finish our brief 3-part tour of organic Spain with a podcast first, an island producer from Mallorca, growing on 20 hectares across 8 plots. Our first stop with Bàrbara is one of their vineyards, which was chosen to illustrate the past and present of the project. She tells us her multi-generational connection with the land, how the project started and its philosophy. We get an insight into local grape varieties, Callet, Manto Negro, Prensal, and how they perform in the local terroir, and also the interplay with older French varieties. We talk about the winery's 3 ranges of wine, Sincronia, Acrollam, and 2 premium reds, Trispol and Sotil. Our second stop takes us to a vineyard showing the future of the winery, home to a plot of Prensal, a local variety, which Bàrbara then discusses in more detail. Before we head back to the winery for a tasting of 3 wines, the Acrollam Blanc, the Acrollam Rosé, and the 2017 Trispol. Bàrbara then looks ahead to travel plans which were still valid last year. And while travel may be on hold for now, these will give you a sense of where these wines are being enjoyed around the world. Enjoy.
For me, being in this vineyard is really important because it shows a little bit how my great-grandfather started on 1945. I come from a family with long wine tradition. I'm the 4th generation making wine, but it's true that I'm the first woman in front of. Before they were just Jaume, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father. And it's true that I grew up between vineyards, barrels, bottles, so. But for me, this vineyard really represents how Porreres landscapes were and how my great-grandfather started, because he was a grower and he used to grow apricots and vineyards. Okay, this was the 2 typical fruits grown in Porreres area, and basically apricots were harvested in June and July, and then grapes in September. Okay, so like that they were busy almost all season, and then in August they went to Colònia Sant Jordi to have some baths and go to the sea. But we have to imagine a completely different Mallorca, So my great-grandfather was doing dry apricots, and he was sun-drying them. So it was in Porreres in June when you came, all landscape was orange because the apricots were sun-drying. And then in September he was selling the grape to another winery to make the wines. But he was unhappy with the price he got for the grapes, and he decided to build his own winery. So in fact, this is how our winery started, our family wine tradition started in 1945, and since then we have never stopped. And every generation has done something, okay? So I would say my great-grandfather started with bulk wine, then my grandfather started bottling wine, And then my father and my mom started planting foreign French varieties, which was something super common 40 years ago on the mainland, but in Mallorca they were the first. And the idea was to try to produce better quality wines. I mean, and this is not because the Callet and Manto Negro and Prensal and Giró and Gorgollassa are not good varieties. They are, but the problem is how they were grown in the past, basically because people were thinking on production and not quality and quality. So if you focus on production, you cannot focus on quality. So what we have seen, our generation, is that local varieties are super interesting, is what will really make the difference, and you can show something different from your island, and really the way is how we grow them. Okay, so for example, Callet, it's a variety that if you grow in very deep soils and you plow and you do production, then it's nothing. But when they are on the appropriate place, especially in Callet, if you have low productions, if you keep green cover crops, if you try to develop biodiversity, then you can make really nice grapes. And then the idea is trying to respect them into the winery, you know. Sure. So that's a little bit how history has been. And when I was a child, and people asked me what I wanted to become when I was older, I always say that I wanted to become a Catalan teacher because my mother tongue is Catalan. Well, I mean, it's Mallorquin, it's a dialect, it's a language I always speak. But at the meantime, I wanted to run a small winery. And I said that it was a small winery because the family winery was big on my approach, you know, because I was smaller, so my aims were on another way. So, well, they were my dreams. So I did my language studies, and when I finished, I decided to do winemaking studies. And at the age of 24, I came back to run the family winery, and I did that until 2012, when then we had a big crisis with my father, and okay, the family winery was closed, but I said, okay, I want to follow and I want to continue, and I want to make wine, so I decided to build up my new project, which is Mesquida Mora. So Mesquida Mora are my two surnames. For me, it was very important to brand as Mesquida and as Mora, because Mesquida for me is the last name from my father's family and which represents the wine tradition. But Mora is my mother's surname, and at the end is in their lands and in their place where I have built my stuff, and she has even gave me her saves, and so she really gave me the support to start this new history. So Mesquida Mora now, it's 20 hectares of vineyard located in 8 different plots in Porreres and in Felanitx area, and all of them grown on biodynamics. So I'm working on biodynamics since 2007. So now it's almost 12 years on biodynamics, no pesticides, no chemical fertilizer, not all this stuff, just trying to respect the soils, trying to respect the plants, and trying to help nature with nature. So, I mean, biodynamic preparations, compost, teas, infusions, and very low doses of sulfur and copper, and trying to reduce them every year as much as we can. So this is a little bit the idea. On vineyards grown on biodynamics, it's true that we have quite a lot of different French varieties, we still have, but it's true that we have old French varieties, so they are 40 years, something like that. So it's nice to keep both. Now I would not plant more Cabernet, that's true, but I'm going to keep 40 years old Cabernet because this makes sense, because if not, every 35 years we can be changing the history, and this is not how it has to work. So for me, the goal is trying to put into the bottle the soil where the plants are grown, and trying to make them as pure as we can and as low intervention as we can. So that's the idea of Mesquida Mora. So at the end, I'm making 7 different wines. Sincronia range, which is our young range wine, coming from the youngest vineyards, with white, rosé, and red. And then we go to Acrollam, as name Acrollam is Mallorca backwards. We do a white and a rosé. It doesn't exist a red, so sometimes people ask, do you have Acrollam red? I say no. Acrollam it's white and rosé. And in Acrollam White, we work with local varieties, just Prensal and Giraud. And in Acrollam Rosé, we work with foreign varieties, Cabernet and Merlot. So, but old ones.
Yeah.
And then we do the two reds, Trispol and Sotil. Trispol, which is the floor, and Sotil, which is the roof, because the floor and the roof is what I needed when I started to get my new project, a place to start with.
I've got to say, this is really kind of bizarre in a way to be in Mallorca, and it's an island I don't know well enough, and I do want to come back and visit. But we really kind of stood in quite a sort of rural, green scene almost. I don't want to say it's an English-looking scene, but it's not what I think most people would think of when they think of Mallorca and the beaches and holidays. It's very, very peaceful, and I got to say, this is probably the kind of prettiest looking vineyard I may ever have been in, because there's just so much life around it. It's not, again, it's miles away from what you might imagine with those sort of rows and rows of vines and being ploughed in the middle. There's lots of grass, there's lots of greenery and lots of biodiversity. So I wonder if this, you talking about this plot and what's going on here and, what's planted around the vines, that might then also give a very, very real exploration of what your philosophy is and what your wines are eventually, I guess, going to taste like.
I mean, that's the real Mallorca, so perhaps sometimes what you see on the brochures or you see on pictures, this is a Mallorca. I mean, this is a Mallorca which has been created for tourism, but for me, and this is the reason why I brand as Acrollam, which is Mallorca backwards, is because this is my Mallorca. This is where I grow up, and this is where things make sense, and everything is related. And this is where my family has been spending their years and taking care of the lands and trying to respect the island and trying to bring as much biodiversity as we can and trying to pass those plots to the next coming generation. So this is for me what makes sense. It's true that I like to go to the beach, and there are beaches that I would never go because it doesn't make sense for me, but there are other super nice places in which you can be relaxed, and I think this is the true image from Mallorca. It's the peaceful Mallorca. It's people working with respect for the land, respect for the soils, trying to preserve the landscapes, which sometimes is not as easy as we would like, and trying to follow our traditions. Okay, it's nice to have tourism, of course. It's super nice to have visitors, but we need that tourism respects the ways, as I like to do as a tourist when I go somewhere, and trying to learn from the locals. I mean, if I visit a place, I like to eat their own food, drink their own wines, and learn about the tradition. This is what makes me richer, Yeah. And so for me, this is the true Mallorca. And now in this plot, it's true, we see a lot of biodiversity. It has not been plowed. It's the old vineyard of Callet. We cut the grass 1 month and a half ago, but now it has repushed. So now it's the moment to recut again and have our mulching and our green cover crop, and trying to avoid the loss of water, and trying to keep as much as biodiversity we can as well. And it's true that we are going to do a small plowing now, but super soft. I mean, I always say that we do not have recipes. For every plot it's different, so we have to take care of them one after the other. It's like when you deal with people. With somebody it's easier than with others. So now in this plot, it's true that it's full of herbs, grass, flowers, birds. We listen to the birds, butterflies.
Trees as well.
The trees, the apricot trees, those are our old apricot trees, which are on original rootstock, so they have not been grafted. So it's just amazing. We have other vineyards with trails, and they are already plowed, but this is a little bit of a wild vineyard, okay? And so we have so many different ways of growing, which is that it's nice, because at the end it becomes a jigsaw of different pieces, and it's what it make the final jigsaw,
And just I think really like it, but maybe just say something about the way you're planting.
I mean, because this is an old vineyard, as I told you, it's 67 years old right now, and I'm trying to replant American rootstocks, and then we will graft them with the same wood we have here. So trying to not lose the genetics we have on this plot. So this year we have done some, and next year we are going to do some more, and that's the idea.
Okay.
If you want, we can see another vineyard. I'm going to show you, which would be the future. Okay.
Okay,
so
that's brilliant. Yeah.
The past.
Okay.
And the present, but now let's see a new vineyard, a new plantation, already 9 years old plantation. From Prensal, the local Mallorcan grape, okay, and we have done it in Goblet again. So I have stopped planting in Royat, in double Royat, because I don't want to having them in trails. It's just to return to the ancient way. Okay, so this is a vineyard we planted in 2010. This is Prensal, and it's the local grape variety, okay. And here, since 2010, what I have decided is to return to the ancient way our great-grandfather parents were doing, which is planting in goblet, okay? Returning and trying to plant new trees, new apricot trees, where it's the fall, so trying to increase biodiversity, trying to return to the landscapes we had, okay? And here you can see that the soil is a little bit different. This is more Call Vermell, which is a typical soil I'm sure you have seen in Felanitx. And here we see that there is no green cover already because we have already cut and we have plowed. This is a style of soil that normally, when we do not have enough water, it closes very fast, so we need to do a soft plow during springtime. So if you have came in wintertime, it was just a nice green cover crop with higher beans and mustard and peas and a lot of differences, but taller than us. So it was like a wild too. And then we passed with the tractor and we cut all the green cover crop, and then we mixed and we try to create a structure. Of soil structure, okay? So this is Prensal, and now it's a season in which we have really the hard work, just trying to remove the green stalks which are not on his right place. So everything is done by hand at Mesquida Mora, of course, from the beginning, from the pruning up to the harvest. So everything is hand harvested, all those 20 hectares. So now in our fields is quite, look, there's a spider here. Hello. And it's busy. Now when it's springtime, it's so, we do not have enough time to plow, because, to work on the green, because so we need a big team and a lot of energy.
Okay. And maybe just a little bit, but like when will these? When they're planted, when will they start to go into wine? Or
normally we start harvesting quite early in our plots. Last year I started on the 9th August. The year before on the 7th August, so it looks like we start harvesting before, basically because I like fresher wines as well, so I'm not want certain ripeness, I just looking for balance, and then harvesting and trying to preserve the fresher part of the wines. So
that's it.
Busy season right now.
Yeah, cool.
So now even we cannot yet see look, yes, here they are. The new grapes coming, okay, so they are small.
But these are already going into wines then, yeah. How old are these?
Yes, of course. This is 9 years vineyard.
9 years, okay.
Yeah, yes,
sorry,
of course. Of course, yes. It's going to be super nice grape, hopefully.
Let's taste Acrollam White. Acrollam, it's Mallorca backwards, as I told you before, because for me the true Mallorca is the one we are just visiting. Okay. And Acrollam White, it's a wine made with Prensal and Giro. Prensal and Giro are two local Mallorcan grape varieties, indigenous varieties, and it's done with no added sulfites, despite on the label it says, but this one is made without sulfites. So this is a wine that it comes from our oldest vineyards, all vineyards from Prensal and Giro. For Prensal, we work in 3 different ways. Well, in one side is carbonic maceration, in another one we do pre-fermentative maceration, and another one we do a skin contact fermentation. So they are different plots, different ways of fermenting, and finally with Giro we just do directly pressed. So we ferment them separately, and once they are fermented and the fermentations are finished, we do the blending, okay? And once they are blended, we age the wine with the fine lees in a steel tank until Christmas, more or less, and then we left it just to decant itself, and then we bottle. So it's a wine that, for me, we feel the Mediterranean landscape. It's salty, even it's calcareous. We find a little bit of clay, even chalk in mouth. It's not a bump of explosion of nose, because this is not how local white varieties are, but we find the pear, the lemon, the white fruits. That's the point. Let's taste Acrollam Rosé, which would be the opposite of Acrollam White, because in Acrollam White it's just local varieties, in Acrollam Rosé it's just foreign varieties, but they are old French foreign varieties. So it's a rosé made with old grapes coming from older vineyards. So it's the oldest Cabernet and the oldest Merlot grown on the island. Okay, so sometimes we say, rosé, and for me, look, rosé is a super great wine. It's super nice, especially in our warm area in summertime, even in spring, even in autumn, and sometimes you want a refreshing wine for winter time, why not? And this is a rosé, this is a gastronomic rosé. Acrollam Rosé, it's a wine made to pair with food. Okay, it's not just a glass of wine. Of course, it can be a glass of wine, but I think it goes deep and deep and deep, and it's a wine to eat with. Yeah. And it just directly press. Okay, it's press, and then ferment it for in one side Merlot, in the other side Cabernet, because they do not ripen on the same time, and then we blend.
I absolutely love that rosé, and I think I like to hear when a winemaker is trying to make something a bit more serious, something with more structure, something that can be enjoyed by itself, but can also be enjoyed with food. And you're putting, relatively old grapes in here as well, aren't you? You're not just using the young grapes. This is not just a sort of an easy rosé, one to just sort of smash down on a hot day. This is a serious rosé, and I love it, and I wish people would make more of this style.
I mean, we are using the best grapes we have, the oldest grapes we have, to make a rosé wine. So for me, rosé should not be a second line wine. It's a wine itself. It's a way of winemaking. It's like the orange wine like that. It's not a new or an amphora wine or a carbonic maceration. I mean, it's just a process to make a nice, drinkable wine. So it has to be full of fruits, tasty, refreshing, deep, powerful. This is what we are looking for. So finally, we are going to taste Trispol 2017. Trispol, as we were speaking about before, means the floor. And on the label, we have the tiles from my great-grandparents' house where I learned to walk. And it's a jigsaw from hydraulic tiles, which shows the Morocco influence on the island on the earliest 1000. So it's a jigsaw made with 3 pieces, as 3 different varieties we have on it. So here we work with Callet, with Syrah, and with Cabernet. Again, with all vineyards, okay? So it's a beautiful, refreshing blend, but at the same time an earthy wine. And this is 2017, which is just released. And I would say that I always say that it's a wine which goes from the island to the world, or from the world to the island, because Callet is a local variety, an indigenous variety. Then Syrah is a Mediterranean profile variety, and Cabernet is a worldwide variety. So depending on where you start, if you start on the world, it's the Cabernet, on the Mediterranean, it's the Syrah, and the Callet is the local one. So this is the idea, blend a little bit of everything and trying to get the best part of each.
Super cool wine as well, I got to say, because I think the story there, bringing those elements together, but I think actually that comes across in the glass as well, because you've got, as well as those different areas and regions, each one of those grapes has a different characteristic as well. So if you want to have this as a food pairing wine, you've got the structure from the Cabernet in there, you've got the spice, which can take it in one direction, but equally I think this does still as well. Looking at the color of it, it could just have this as by itself, pair it with itself maybe, and it would go down very well. Huge thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure meeting you. As I mentioned, out in the field, you were one of the first winemakers that I learned about when I was first learning about wine and looking for information about wine. So it's real, feels like coming home in a way to come here and see. But we spoke a little bit before, kind of off mic, about you getting out into the market. So I'm just curious, what have you kind of got coming up, I guess, for the rest of the year, and where might you be out there? Where might people be able to sort of meet you and try your wines?
Now the traveling season is going down as well, because we have a lot to do in the fields. But then the next fair we are attending, it's Fenavin, which takes place in Ciudad Real, and it's a fair focused on importers and distributors all over the world. And then, by the way, I think the season is going to be almost finished, but it's true that every year I'm traveling, especially during the first term of the year, in the different countries where we have our importers. So once a year, or 1 year yes, the other no. It's so every 2 years I visit England, especially London, with our wine importer, Notre & Co. They do their event at Saatchi Gallery, so normally I go there. Then we travel to the States, to Canada, to Switzerland, to Belgium, so trying to support and to let know the wines from the first hand on the different countries in which we export, and trying to support our importer. But then I have to say that if people come to Mallorca, and we are open, our doors are open, and people is always welcome. Normally we organize wine tastings and visits, and so we try to give the first-hand explanation about what's going on in Mesquida Mora, and we try to offer a nice wine tasting experience, even with nice Mallorcan food. So all of it, it's done with previous reservation. But if not, we are open. Our shop is open every week. So from Monday to Friday, and then on Saturdays. So I think it's nice to see where the wines are produced, and the team and me, if it's the case. I'm normally here, but sometimes I'm traveling.
All right.
And so thank you very much for coming. And it's a pleasure to host you.
A huge thanks to Barbara for taking the time to show me around. I do believe Mallorca is one of those islands that are not always associated with winemaking, and I hope that by spreading your story we can start to put that right. And if you do happen to find yourself in Mallorca, definitely worth peeling yourself off the beach and going to visit the winery, the website of which has been left below in the description. Some of Barbara's wines are also carried in the UK by Notre & Co, so well worth checking out the relevant section on their website. This does unfortunately mark the end of this first series of Organic Spain. I'm sure you will know by now that I did start the podcast when I was still living in Spain. So I'm super interested in exploring the country in more detail. So do watch this space for future coverage on Spain. And in the meantime, if you're not already, I would love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. See you next time.